everybody can copy everything. If you follow LinkedIn, if you see a lot of companies posting, everything is starting to become the same. Content online is becoming the same, both B2B and B2C. So the only way to really stand apart is authenticity.
Welcome to the Multilingual Content Podcast, where experts discuss international content management, product localization, and global expansion. I'm Caterina from Undertow. We create and manage localization programs for B2B SaaS companies so they can grow globally. Today, our founder Nicola Calabrese will be talking with Joliene van Grieken, co-founder of the Growth Syndicate, a fractional marketing team helping companies scale their marketing when they hit a plateau. In this episode, they will explore how AI is reshaping marketing, what it means for international expansion, and why authenticity and credibility matter more than ever in the world of automated content. So, without further ado, let's dive in.
So hello and welcome to the Multilingual Content Podcast. How are you today?
Hi, Nicola. Nice to meet you or see you.
Today we're going to talk about how with AI marketing is changing. But before we jump into today's topic, would you mind telling a little bit to our audience about yourself?
Yes, of course. Yeah, I am one of the co-founders of the Growth Syndicate. We are like a fractional marketing team, and we place ourselves within companies and help them scale and build up their marketing when they hit a plateau, when they've not started with marketing yet, or they keep hiring the wrong marketeers. And before that, I've been in startup scale-up land my whole career, had lots of leadership roles within marketing, and now 2 years ago, decided to start my own business.
And today, as I was saying, we're going to talk about marketing, how it's changing with AI, how it changes across different countries. So where do you typically advise companies to start when they're trying to optimize for AI search across different markets? And what do you think is the biggest misconception that you see on how this differs from, let's say, traditional SEO?
If you look at the basics of SEO, it's optimization for keywords and backlinks, right? That's the biggest foundation. And I don't want to make it it's a whole job, and it can be a full-time job. I don't want to make it to sound like it's not, but it's mostly optimizing for keywords and finding the right backlinks. Search with regards to LLMs is really way more focused on credibility. So way more focused on mentions, not just by your own website, but also on other websites, based on trust, based on domain authority, and also clear communication. First, it was what is in your H2, H3, what kind of keywords do you use? But now it's you need to have very simple text, because AI takes chunks of your messaging and presents that as a solution instead of ranking for a certain keyword. I think that's the biggest difference. I do believe that if you are already starting with SEO and your SEO is well set up, it will help with being mentioned, but it's not enough, right? You focus on citations, not on keywords.
Obviously, you said it's a different way of writing as well, the content now compared to the traditional SEO. So how do you recommend to balance between technical requirements in the sense preparing the text for AI and making sure that you still have an authentic brand voice across different languages, different markets?
Yeah, I think now more than ever, that's going to be the difference, right? Because everybody can copy everything. If you follow LinkedIn, if you see a lot of companies posting, everything is starting to become the same. Content online is becoming the same, both B2B and B2C. So the only way to really stand apart is authenticity, because that's the only thing that AI can't copy or can't do itself really well. So I think brand is now more than ever very important. And that's why, of course, we also use AI as content machines and to speed up the production and via different channels and automate big chunks of it. However, you need human beings, one, to come up with the ideas and the prompts, and also to do the check afterwards to make sure that it's actually really resonating with the audience, because a lot of people stop thinking about who are they writing for when it's AI generated, and it becomes a checkbox exercise. And then you have a great technical optimized SEO or geo content piece, but when your audience lands on it and reads it, it's this is not relevant for us. So therefore, I think it's very important to make sure that the human is always in the loop.
Yeah, because I guess like with the AI, you can get like 80% there maybe, but everybody has the same 80%. So that 20% is going to make the difference there.
And they're a good content person who has that vision. It's the same as not just content, but also visuals, right? If you take a great designer, a lot of the part of design you can also automate. But somebody who has that view, that way of thinking, that way of looking at something, it's the same with content. And that no AI can do. Humans are still very much part of this creative process.
Yeah. Visual is a good example. Like I really struggle. I'm not good with design. So even if I try to create something with AI, I see it, I understand I don't like it, I want to change something, but I don't know how to, like, what to ask to improve it. Yeah. I don't have the skills, let's say design skills that a designer obviously has as an eye. They know what to change and how to change it and give it direction. Yeah, absolutely. And still within the fact about expanding across border, going to different countries, which is something we talk a lot about on this podcast. My question here is, what is the most common mistake that you see companies when they try to expand their marketing operations internationally? And how that differs maybe from the challenges that they might have at home. So there's a difference when they do set up marketing in their home market and when they try to set up marketing for other markets, either in the place or from the headquarters. Like, how do you see that? What's the biggest mistake you usually see happening?
There are actually a couple. It's not one. I think that a lot of people don't understand their own buying cycle and the ICP that's in their buying cycle, especially if you, for example, work with enterprise or enterprise customers or enterprise software. It's a very different buying journey. And localization or market expansion becomes very different if you're focusing on enterprise, because it's such a more complex buying circle, because you have different stakeholders. And sometimes in different countries, they have different names or they have a different authority. And people don't realize that, and they just copy paste what worked in one country and copy it to the next. Especially if you go into countries like Germany or France or anywhere in Europe. I see a lot of the times that they treat a Nordic country the same as Germany, even though some of the cultures part are the same. In Germany, you can't sell in English. You still need to localize. You still need to have a person on the ground. So they think you can test and see if the message is resonating. But the problem is that if there's no follow-up, you will still have a problem. And France is not different. What I also see when I work with American companies is that they see Europe as one culture, which is actually something that's quite funny and it has nothing to do with AI, but a company I work for got acquired by an American company. And they were like, what's the European culture? And I was like, that's not how it works. We're all very different. So you need to still very much niche down on your localization. Doesn't matter where you're from, who you're targeting. It's really important that you focus on who am I serving in this country? What are their pain points?
Is it like kind of redoing market research for every single country as if it were like starting from scratch? Or do you think it's something that can be, let's say, taken over and adapted?
I think Benelux and Nordics, UK, US, you can cluster them. But I think still, for example, normally when you do a marketing campaign, a lot of the times you focus on industries, especially if you not do a PLG motion, but more very sales heavy sales cycle, you focus on industries because that's the only way you're going to touch the right people. If you think a certain industry works in one country, you cannot just copy that campaign and do it in another country, because it might be that they already have a solution there or they have another way of doing their thing. So you still need to do some sort of research, or the best thing is just get somebody there, especially a salesperson who knows the industry super well or knows the space that you're in very well, and just gather that knowledge there. Like, I don't think you always need to do massive analyses, which has been done in the past. You can test a lot, but still, a lot of times people don't think about how the solution impacts or the problem that they're solving is different from ranging from different countries.
And do you think like partnerships as well might have a role there? So rather than, let's say, hiring somebody in the market right away, maybe you already have a partner that has presence so you can leverage that? Or...
Yes. Yeah, that definitely works. Can be a partner that's complementary to your service, or can be a partner that you have a nice referral model with. They're in the same space. And starting with a partner is always great, especially in European countries, even in the US, because it creates credibility. And I think that's still, like, even though the buying cycle change or how people buy changes, still the most important thing for people when deciding on something is it credible? Like, am I getting what I want? Is that good or is that not good? That hasn't changed. That hasn't changed for the past 1,000 years, right? People still buy from other people that they trust. So yeah, I think partners is always a great way to go.
And I think, trust with more and more, let's say, content, AI generated content, trust is going to be trust and personal relationships are going to become more and more important, I think.
I totally agree. Yeah.
And we're on the, say, localization part of things, since now with AI, the cost of like translation, which obviously is not enough to enter a market, not even by a stretch of imagination, but it's that part of the localization, the just translation part, translating text, it's much cheaper now, obviously with AI tools, because you can do at least part of the work with that and then have people review it and implement it. But so that will generate some, let's say, savings on one hand. Do you usually there's a way or some things that you advise your client to reallocate those savings, like toward, let's say, creating original content in new language, or maybe some other part of the localization strategy?
Yeah. Also, this again depends on the company that we work for. So yes, definitely localization. Part of that content can be generated by AI. Still very important to speak with your local ICP to understand if those problems are the same, at least that maybe the translation is good, but the messaging is different per country. So that's one thing you always need to fact check. Apart from that, I believe events are still very much an important part. What people don't invest to enough because it's costly, but it's very important. I think that is something that I would advise. I would also advise, if you have a more PLG type of company, for the audience that is more PLG motion, I think start with creating budget around people that are very happy with your products. Try to see if they want to talk about that, shout about that, create great case studies, video case studies, these kind of things to build that credibility, because it's going back to the same principle. It's like you need to create a credibility in the country that you're entering, stating that you know what you're talking about. You've handled that market before, or that type of company, or that type of industry. So you can actually solve their problem. And then I think it's very important to focus on content that creates that credibility. So video content, of course, is a very good one. And events. I think events is really coming back. I know in COVID it went down a lot, but it's especially local small events is something. One of a client is from the Nordics that we helped. We did an ABM campaign there, and it was very localized on 2 industries. And we did very small gatherings with just that industry, and it worked like a charm because we had a local salesperson there. That's the only thing we needed. The rest was not local, but it creates the biggest amount of trust if you actually show your face and have a conversation.
I'm assuming this kind of strategy works very well with when you have high ticket sales, it's enterprise. So it is worth to do a small event and just get 10 people. Even if
small event is not you pay 2-3K. If you get a venue and you pay for everybody's dinner, you do a little bit of ad budget around that, and you get 10 to 15 prospects with one client. That's it, right? It's not that a lot of people think, oh my God, events are very expensive. They are if you go to a big booth at a big conference, but make it small. You don't need to make it big, but going local, going niche in the market that you're expanding to is very important, and you need face-to-face time with them.
Okay, so that's definitely a misconception. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily need to be super expensive.
Yeah. No, definitely not.
And obviously, as a fractional CMO, you essentially building marketing functions for multiple companies across different countries. So do you have a framework for deciding which marketing activities should be standardized globally and which one maybe should be customized for each market or each region?
Yes, I think overall, when you talk about different building blocks within marketing, right? You have how you run your ads is standardized because it follows a certain process. Your messaging top level is standardized. However, it can slightly differ on ICP and on positioning based on the country that you enter, but overall it should still relate. Everything related to operations and things that are set up are quite less global. It should be global because you want to actually measure the impact of different countries on your pipeline or on what you're doing. For me, the localization happens everywhere what's being touched by the people that you're trying to sell to, right? So design changes depending on the country that you're selling to. Of course, the brand doesn't. You still have a brand. But what kind of visuals you use sometimes differ per country. What kind of wording you use changes per country. Your ICP changes per country. So these things require local knowledge and information. And I think that's very important. Of course, if you look, there are some products or services or software that you use that is quite universal, right? And there, if you really solve a massive need, then you don't need that much localization. Localization gets harder when it's a tool or something that people are using that needs to be adapted to their local inside market feelings, whatever they need, right? And that's where the tricky part comes from. Otherwise, you don't need to do any localization. So when you deal with people and you ask people for a change of their behavior, that's where localization happens.
Sorry to interrupt your listening, but do you want to grow your B2B SaaS in international markets? Because every country is different, and what users value in one market doesn't necessarily matter in another one. At Undertow, we help B2B SaaS companies like yours succeed in their international expansion. We create customized localization strategies that address the unique challenges of each market. In this way, you can effectively attract, engage, and convert customers worldwide. Visit undertowlanguages.com to find out more. And now back to the show. Yeah, and I'm thinking as well, like with software, the most complex one to localize are, let's say, everything related to tax compliance, since that changes drastically from one country to the other.
Healthcare is everything regulatory changes a lot. But also, for example, if you are integration software, then different organizations use different tools, or they have a different majority of tools within. So these things also change a lot. But I would always still go for a market that is like, it's always easier if you have a little bit of success somewhere to expand that success than to build success from scratch. So if you find an adjacent market that is big enough from a TAM perspective, or actually obtainable market perspective, focus on that first. Then what we still see is like in Europe, you need to go to Germany. No, you don't. Not in the beginning, right? You can always go to Germany later, but think about how much time it takes to actually enter a market from a credibility perspective.
Yeah, there might be markets that are not as big as Germany, but they're easier to enter into. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Sometimes also depends on what your investor wants to see.
Yeah, that's a whole different...
Yes, a whole different conversation. Yeah.
And with the fact that now more and more like people are interacting with chatbots rather than chat interfaces and LLMs, rather than, let's say, web pages as previously, how is that changing maybe the content strategy and the information architecture for companies entering new market? How do you see this changing, if it is changing?
It's changing a lot. It has already changed a lot. For the past, I think, since 2018, 19, already the function of the website has changed, right? First, it was very much an informative part of your buying cycle, right? You got all your information on the website, and then you looked at all different pages, and then you decided if you wanted to buy something. The buying journey has already changed very much so, because you go to Reddit or you go to all these other different tools, and a lot of your decision making happens there and not on your website. Once you enter the website, normally you already have a shortlist. That hasn't changed. Only the conversation now happens just in chat. So it is very important, what we also mentioned before, is to make sure that the content that you do have on your website is very much optimized for that conversation. You need to, like, what sets you apart from your competitor? How does it actually work? You want to be mentioned and cited by chat as much as you can. And that's where you get the credibility also from, and also from other companies or other outlets giving you credibility. So if you're mentioned a lot on Reddit chats, like there's a lot of different ways for you to make sure that you get mentioned. So a lot of geo also happens offsite as much as onsite. I think that's for me also a massive difference, is you need to make sure you can get that credibility everywhere.
Which is, it's not that straightforward. So
it's not that straightforward. Yeah. No. So normally it was like your backlinks are now your credibility from offsite. So other people need to mention you. On the other hand, it's also something you can enforce a little bit by it still started producing content that actually people want to read or listen to or watch or something like that. That's still what it starts with. But the optimization part is just slightly different. But I do feel that if you've done your SEO right in the beginning, it will still help you now with your geo, because they still scrape, right? The scraping hasn't changed.
And my question specifically about web pages structure, would it make sense now to, let's say, always have a FAQ or like sections as questions in there, or is we already over that?
No, FAQ is still very much, for on-site optimization, still very much helps, because as I mentioned, AI reads chunks of your pages, so, and not just a keyword. So in that sense, it is very important to put an FAQ on there. I think very clear headers is also very important, because There, it's not optimized for keywords. It's really optimized for readability. And do you really tell or explain what you're doing? That's very important. So it's actually more simple language than before, which will help. And that's more on the on-site part of it. And of course, still your meta descriptions and all these kind of things need to be set up correctly. But off-site is becoming more and more important. How can you create that credibility not on your own domain?
Makes sense. And when you're brought in to scale marketing across geographies, so what are the first 3 operational or hiring decisions that you usually make? And how do you think about building a team versus hiring fractional resources like yourself?
I think in the beginning, it's always good to hire fractional talent. Why? Because you don't always know what type of marketeer you need. Because marketeer is so broad, right? If you need a salesperson, you need a salesperson. And of course, also there you have dimension in enterprise, these kind of things. But overall, it's quite clear what you need. For marketing, it's slightly different because you touch quite a lot of different things. If you have a very difficult product, it might be interesting to hire a product marketeer. If you have a way more event-driven marketing, you might want to hire an event manager. So that changes a little bit. I think also with AI, things are changing a lot on what you need. I do still very much believe you need a content person. You need a designer. Why is you don't need 3 content writers or 3 designers. You need 1. And they can work with agents to orchestrate the content production. So you need less people than you needed before, especially if you're scaling your team. I would definitely now go to like a RevOps GTM engineer. I don't like all these titles, but I do feel it's very important to have somebody there who can build signals, because I feel that marketing is really shifting towards signals. Like, can we predict what signals create demand or create intent? And with everything that's happening around AI and with different connections you can make between different tooling, you can actually create those signals or create more up-to-date signals. I think that's for me also a thing. In the beginning, when you did a competitive analysis or you created a battle card, you needed to do it every 6 to 8 months because things change. But now you build an AI that builds a ready-made battle card for you, whereas a salesperson, you can put in, this is the company I'm talking to, give me the top 10 points that I need to talk about, right? So these things are changing. So I would definitely still hire a content person and a designer and a GTM engineer. And then you still need a performance person that can be in-house or external. However, what I do feel is the more you niche down on your agency, so an SEO agency or a performance agency or a design agency, they are there for one function. And that I feel is a little bit the problem, because if you're there for performance, you will never say performance is not working because you have a innate reason to be there. The same goes for design or anything else. So I do feel it's important that if you get fractionals, you get a little bit more broader skilled fractionals that really want to scale your company and not just scale one function within marketing.
And I think the fractional model can embed a little bit better inside companies than maybe a traditional agency. Yeah.
And especially leadership functions. I think fractional CMOs are getting more and more. I think a lot of different fractionals, but especially CMOs are getting more popular. I think it's good because do you need a more brand type CMO? Do you need a technical CMO? I think that is very important. I do feel that a lot of people call themselves CMO at the moment. So there's also a big risk of hiring somebody that you think is a CMO, but does not have the experience.
And in general, if we have, obviously we talked about several different things, but in general, when you think about a localization is it changing? How is it changing in the AI era? Do you think it is changing a lot? Or are we basically applying old principles to new channels? Because what you mentioned before as well, SEO is not completely disappeared. Some of the things are changing, maybe the backlinks. Before where I know a lot of people didn't do backlinks because it was complicated.
They still don't do it.
But now that's becoming really important. So it's probably getting more traction as apart compared to maybe on-site optimization. Do you think we're applying old principles to new ways of doing things, or everything is changed completely?
Marketing is still psychology. It's still, you have a problem, I can help you solve that problem, or you want something and I can buy that for you, and pulling into those emotions, and at one point getting them enough traction on that pain point for them to say I need a solution for this, right? So how we buy and that we want to buy and that we buy based on a lot of times on frustration, emotions, and these kind of things have not changed. How we buy changes. And first it was offline, and we looked at a window store and we saw all the things there. Still in the Albert Heijn, you have these different, like, you pay for a certain level because you want to have it on your eyes. So there's still things there that's very much human. I think the thing that has changed a lot is your competition, because it's a saturated market, both from entering new spaces to staying in your own country. A lot of channels are currently saturated. So you need to be able to stand out. So yeah, in that sense, for me, it slightly has changed, especially the online part of marketing, if I would take it like that. But people still buy, and people still buy from people, in essence. Even if AI says you need to buy this, and you go to the website and it looks weird and nobody has used it or nobody's ever written about it, or you read a bad comment about it, you will not do so. So it hasn't changed, just the channels and the way we buy it has changed.
Do you think it might change when like agents are buying from agent? Like
I find that a bit scary, to be honest. It's probably going to happen. Like, it's with AI, everything is changing so fast. Like when I started 2 years ago with using proper chatbots to help us with our content strategy, it was still not so good, right? It required a lot of iterations to get it to a point where you're like, and a lot of repetition. And I told you this before, and you're still not doing what I want you to do, right? And now it's already getting so much better. And especially with Cloud Coach, you can do so many things, or Lovable or whatever, all the tools are out there. But when you give an agent control over your money, that's where, in my opinion, it gets scary. If you ask an agent to buy something to you, in essence, you're giving it permission to buy something for you, which means access to your money. I think that can get scared. I forgot the name, the chat room that was created by where bots can talk to each other and what kind of topics they have. I don't know anymore.
It was Cloud Book or something like that.
Yeah.
Cloud Book. Yeah.
I don't know. That was quite scary.
The social media for the Cloud. Yeah.
Yeah. And that they're talking about lying and saying things. So there's definitely a downside to it.
About let's say the human owner tried to push them to do like illegal stuff. So
I don't know. I do feel, I wonder for if you, especially, I don't know if it's like a smaller tool where you have a very low ACV that you can ask it to buy something like that. But if you have a company that is buying software or something for over 120K, they will not, I hope they will not put an agent on that. And we live in, probably something like that will happen, but like, I don't think I am the right person to answer that question because everything is changing so quickly. I do feel that marketing teams will get smaller and you will still have somebody responsible for all the functions, for different functions. Yeah. But the execution layer will be way more focused towards AI, which is also sad. Because it means that a lot of people who are now entering the market or will enter the market in the next 10 years will have a very difficult time with finding a job.
Yeah, and it will be a very different job for what it used to be.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like a lot of more like, say, engineering type, like marketing engineer or go-to-marketing engineer.
Yeah. Well, on the other hand, you can also say probably somebody who's very creative can also make it work if they need to understand though how it works. But I think creative people are still very much going to decide on, like, you still need a strategy.
Yeah.
Proper strategy on how to do things. So yeah, we have to see. But for now, I would definitely focus on making sure you keep that authenticity within your brand.
And to wrap it up, if you could give like one piece of advice to a SaaS founder who's about to launch the first international expansion in the next 90 days, what would it be? Like, what would you advise them to do? And what's the one thing they should not do? I know there's many.
Seeing result in 90 days in Germany. No, I'm joking. Yeah, I think as I mentioned before, I would still stick to a market that's adjacently quite similar from a language perspective or from a ICP industry perspective. Because the more you understand how these people buy, it easier it will be to copy. Plus, for example, if you take the Nordics as an example, if you have one country in the Nordics, it's easier to go to the other markets because they trust you there. And still, localization, even if you can translate with AI, you will see that. So if you can keep it, if it's your first country and you have an English platform, please keep it English. That would be my advice. Maybe some people will disagree with me, but the easiest way is to go to a country where they accept English. And what would not do? I would definitely, if you want to start, if you're not German or not French, don't use these as the first markets you enter. Especially because most of the time people do market expansion before they actually ready to do market expansion. That means that they have not nailed their own market enough, but mostly there's pressure from the outside, or there's pressure from society saying like, if you want to be a successful company, you need to go to another country, right? So if you've not found your magic sauce in your own country, then don't do it at all. But if you are still figuring that out, then find a market that's quite adjacent in the buying cycle and in the way they sell.
I think that's really good advice to close on. So thank you so much for joining us on the Multilingual Content Podcast.
Thank you, Nicola, for having me. It was great.
Thanks for joining us today. The Multilingual Content Podcast is powered by Undertow. We help B2B SaaS companies grow in any language. Get in touch if you want to know more. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episode. If you want to support us, remember to give 5 stars to the podcast. See you next time.